Imagine with me that we are taking a road trip together to Chicago. We've gone online and we have our passes to the Art Institute. We're planning on going through the Lurie Gardens right nearby. And we've made reservations at a few restaurants we've checked out on Instagram. But the highlight of our trip are the front row tickets that we have to Second City. Second City is this improvisational comedy stage. They bring together some actors, comedians, assemble them on a stage, and give them a ridiculous scenario and tell them on the spot without any rehearsal. They have to put together a dialogue and a scene and make it funny. So, the host might turn to the actors and say something like this. Okay, one of you is a corrupt minotaur who was raised on the West Coast. The rest of you are trying to sell Girl Scout cookies to the minotaur. Go. Or they may say something like, you're in a pie shop, and you're trying to convince all the other customers around you to band together and save your small coastal town from a blind, angry magician who's trapped inside of a bottle. Go. How would you design a scene from that? It's amazing to me. But there actually are some rules that guide improvisational actors. One of the most important rules that guides them is called the yes and rule. For a sketch to be successful, you can't undercut what the person before you has done. You have to take the direction that they've started out with and get on board with it, but then you have to develop it and expand it further yourself. It's this yes and approach. And I think this yes and approach is a really good idea that describes the way that the book of Ecclesiastes views our life. The imagined author of the book of Ecclesiastes is Solomon, this ancient king of Israel and Judah who was one of the richest people alive at that time. Solomon, in the course of the book, imagines and examines his own life and then looks out in the world and tries to make sense of it. Over and over again, all throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, the author says that the world and human life is absurd. Our translation renders this as vanity, which I don't think is the best way to think about it. Vanity has this idea of nothingness or meaninglessness. And I don't think that's quite what the book of Ecclesiastes is trying to get at. Instead, Ecclesiastes is talking about these contradictions of life, these paradoxes of our experience, the way that life often can seem perplexing and even absurd. So, for instance, the author of Ecclesiastes says that he has worked really hard all of his life to gather together wealth and splendor that's fitting for a king. But then he says that since it's taken his whole life to accumulate that, he's actually not the one who's going to be able to enjoy it. It's going to be his descendants who do. If we translate this into our experience, maybe we could think about it like, if you work diligently every month for 30 years to pay off your mortgage, once you own your house free and clear, you still have to pay property tax. So in one sense, you're always a renter, no matter if you own your home or not. Well, the author of Ecclesiastes also notes that over time, as we live our life, we gain wisdom and understanding. But there's an irony of that, because once we gain wisdom and understanding, normally in the second half of our life, our bodies are falling apart. So we can't really fully use this wisdom that we have. But then when we're young and our bodies are healthy, we lack the wisdom that we need to fully take hold of the experiences that we encounter. Solomon looks out at the splendor and beauty of the world and is amazed by it. But then he remarks that our lives are so short compared to the world that it's almost like you and me are these little fruit flies that buzz around for a few weeks before we nosedive headfirst into a glass of wine. And also, ironically, Ecclesiastes remarks that the more we learn, the more we discover how little we know and how much there is to learn. When I began my PhD, I thought this was the time where I can learn all the answers. I can figure everything out. I can nail everything down. And then after I finished my PhD, I looked back on the experience and I realized I had more questions at the end of my PhD than I had at the beginning. Solomon observes that people can harm others, they can be corrupt, they can act in unethical ways. And a lot of people get away with it. And sometimes people who do right suffer. So what does the book of Ecclesiastes make of all of this? Well, one could reflect on this and say that since life is absurd, it's meaningless, and there's really no point in engaging with life. That's not how the book concludes, though. The book concludes with yes and. Here's my translation of the end of the book of Ecclesiastes. Yes, life is absurd, and keep your wonder for God alive and live in ways that bring God's love to the surface. It's so easy to go one way or another when we look at the absurdities of life. We could focus just on the difficulties and challenges and perplexing aspects of being human. And we could ignore the currents of God's love that are always around us, that are always with us. And we could conclude that life is meaningless, it's not worth anything. Or we could trivialize life's difficulties. We could say, they're really not that bad when you think about it. You just need to focus on God's love and be happy. Ecclesiastes doesn't do that either. Ecclesiastes says, yes, life is difficult. It's hard, perplexing, and absurd sometimes. And it is wonderful and joyous and propelled forward by a million acts of divine love. And for us to have meaning and significance in our lives, we're called to join with these currents of divine love and to amplify them and to spread them out through the world that's often confusing and absurd and we can't quite figure out. This is the true paradox that's at the heart of the Christian life. Yes, and. It's a way of thinking about the world, but also it's a way of guiding us through it. God invites us to accurately assess the world, to accurately embrace the experiences that we have. Not sugarcoat them, not trivialize them or brush them aside. But also, at the same time, to remember the deep significance and meaning of being agents of divine love. In some ways, you and me are like actors on that stage at Second City. We're improvising our way through the world, saying yes and. So, friends, this week, how are you going to say yes and?